Welcome to the Brownfield's Quarterly Roundtable at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection Public Hearing Room. Today is April 10th, 2024. This is our second quarterly roundtable meeting of this year, and thank you to our in-person audience and our virtual audience. We are going to be doing this both obviously in person, but also remotely through our Teams app. First, I wanted to thank Tyrone and Anthony for the great work to put on these virtual and in-person presentations like this. I also wanted to thank Rachel Stopper and Jamila Harris, who are over on the side, and a great part of our Office of Brownfields and Community Revitalization. My name is Frank McLaughlin. I manage the Office of Brownfields and Community Revitalization for the New Jersey DEP. My managers, David Hames, the Assistant Commissioner for the Contaminated Site Remediation Redevelopment Program, and my Director, Gwen Zervis, unfortunately had other commitments this morning, so won't be able to join us for like a Q&A this morning. Before we start, I would like my staff from the Office of Brownfields and Community Revitalization to introduce themselves, starting with Rachel and Jamila, so people in the audience and also people at home know who are the government officials serving the Brownfields causes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Stopper, and I'm an HDSRF coordinator in the Brownfields office.
Hello, my name is Jamila Harris. I'm an HDSRF coordinator, and I'm also a BDA manager.
Kevin Schick, returning post-retirement to assist the program on a part-time basis.
Hello, my name is Emily Perez. I'm an environmental specialist with the Office of Brownfield.
Alan Miller. I will not sing. So Alan Miller, BDA manager, all of Northern New Jersey. Thank you.
One of our staff, Ron Wachowski, is attending virtually today. Ron does a number of BDAs, including Gloucester City and Salem, and also does landfill redevelopment and green energy projects on landfills and brownfields. I'd also like my EPA partners to introduce themselves so the audience knows who to call on the federal side. Thanks, Terry.
You call anybody but me. Good morning, everybody. My name is Terry Wesley. I serve as the Brownfield Section Manager at EPA Region 2 in New York City. For folks who are new, just want to let you know that EPA Region 2 covers New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, as well as 8 federally recognized Indian nations. I'm going to turn over to my esteemed colleagues here who really know all the good stuff about the program.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashita Patel. I'm the Brownfield State and Tribal Lead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shanine Mitchell. I'm the Regional Brownfields Coordinator. I also coordinate the Brownfields Job Training Program.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Joe. Nice to have our Superfund and Removal Action colleagues. They have been a great help to the Brownfields efforts. Did we get everybody? And Joe will be giving a presentation later, and a lot of the work that's been done in our cities was initially catalyzed by the Removal Action Program. So hopefully Joe will touch on it, and if he doesn't, I will make sure I do, because we greatly appreciate their assistance in both the state and the federal Brownfields programs. Also, I'd like to introduce our sister agency, Economic Development Authority. Barbara, would you say? And if Elizabeth or others are...
Yes, sure. I'm Barbara Vadney. I'm a team lead with New Jersey Economic Development Authority. I work on Brownfield's tax incentives. So I'm in person here. Elizabeth Limbrick, who's the director of Brownfields and Sustainable Systems at EDA, will be presenting hybrid on our program and give you updates on the program.
Thank you so much. And in the past, we introduced everybody. We just don't have the time. But I just wanted everybody to know the other state agencies, our federal partners who are in the Brownfields efforts with us, and of course, my staff at DEP. First off is Rachel Stopper to give us HDSRF update. Are you going to do it up front here, Rachel, or from your? You want to come up here? Or are you going to do it from your?
Before the presentation, there are some in-house rules. This is a friendly reminder. So for questions and speaking etiquette, if you are online, so please make sure at all times your microphone is muted and your camera is off. If you would like to ask a question and you are virtual, please enter your name and your affiliation in the chat box and request to ask a question. Oh, and when we call on you, you may then unmute yourself. And if you like, you can turn off your camera. And when you have finished speaking, please remute yourself and turn off your camera. And we've already addressed this in the chat. For attendance purposes, if you would like to identify yourself and your affiliation in the chat, that is how we keep attendance for the virtual attendees. All right, my name is Rachel, and I'm the HDSRF coordinator. And I'm here to give a brief update of the HDSRF fund. Right now, we have 2 full-time coordinators and 2 part-time. Right now, there is over $63 million available in the fund, and that's as of February. HDSRF recommendations during Q1 were about $696,000. And in the spirit of the theme of this roundtable, I wanted to report on the number of nonprofit grant approvals that we have given out since the inception of the program, which was in 2005. And of the $5 million that is available for the nonprofit grant, $4,536,299 has been allocated for projects. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Rachel. Well, I could take notes from you. You are succinct and brief. I still haven't learned. Terry, you got a question or a recommendation for me?
Could you explain, Rachel, if possible, the different, if it is brief, the different eligibility requirements for those that are nonprofits seeking to get HDSRF versus others?
Yeah, we are going over that in a later presentation, but it's very, very similar to the PA SIRI grant for public entities, if you're familiar with that one. But we will be going over that grant in more detail in the afternoon or later on.
Do we have any audience questions for Rachel? Thanks, Rachel. Yes, we will provide some more details on the nonprofit grant in a bit. Next up, we have our very close partner at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. Elizabeth Limbrick is going to update us on the incentives and the work at NJEDA that has been supporting brownfield redevelopment in the state.
Hi.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Good morning. Thank you, Frank. I guess it looks like you guys are able to see my screen, so let me just go ahead and get started. Thank you for having me. I do appreciate this opportunity to talk to folks and make sure folks are aware of all the different services that are available. So the first thing I just wanted to bring attention to is that we have a couple different programs. One is funded by our generous partners here at US EPA, which is our Brownfield Planning and Assessment Services. So under this program, we have procured 5 contractors. So, basically, what you would normally call environmental consultants, but in the EPA world, we call contractors that provide this free service to do assessments, investigations. It can be a publicly owned property. It can be privately owned property. as long as it kind of meets the definition of a brownfield and we vet it out with EPA, it's pretty broad. We do phase ones, we do PA, SI, RI, as well as some planning services as long as it's really directly related to brownfields. It's really easy to access this. It's really easy. All you do is submit an expression of interest form. If you have a property and are interested in receiving these services, I have a link in these slides, and these slides will be made available to you. So, you don't have to rush and try and jot all this down. And we also have an email address, which is bfassessment@njeda.com. And with that, I will say we do require that the property owner provide site access. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that we find that is, the biggest hurdle, biggest challenge. And we also do require that the municipality sign a waiver for liability as well, and just, for their awareness so they know that this work is happening. We also have our Brownfields Impact Fund, also supported through a grant from US EPA. With this, we offer loans. So the maximum loan amount is $350,000. It's really favorable funding, really favorable terms. We're talking about interest rates of 2%, which can actually drop down to a floor of 1%. The terms can be up to 20 years. There's no payments for the first 4 years. So it's really meant to carry out the cleanup activities at brownfield sites. So if you have a property that's interested in this, reach out to us. Our website is again here, and again, you will get these slides sent to you after this. I understand you guys are going to talk much more about HDSRF later, so I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but I did just want you to know that HDSRF, again, it's a grant and loan program jointly administered by DEP. DEP handles all the technical end of stuff, and EDA handles the money side of things, but there are definitely a lot of projects that benefit from this program as well. And then the one that is like near and dear to my heart and is really our largest program by far at EDA when it comes to brownfields is our Brownfield Redevelopment Incentive Program. And this program is a tax credit program, so it's a little different. It's not a grant. What happens is you enter into our program, you get approved for it, we go through all of the different paperwork and stuff, then you do your remediation, and at the end of that, based on what your total remediation costs, you get a tax credit of up to 50 to 60% of those eligible remediation costs, up to a maximum of $4 to $8 million. So think of it this way. When you're doing your state taxes, and by the way, it doesn't apply to like property tax, it's like corporate business tax and a couple other like insurance premium tax, things like that. It's almost like if you had a gift card or a promo when you do like online stuff anymore that lets you take that credit off of the taxes. Now, what we find in this program is typically most folks don't necessarily use it themselves. They're selling the tax credit, which is allowed under this program, to someone who does have that kind of tax liability. So I would say one of the key things to take away on this is really funding just remediation. It's not vertical construction. So if you're looking for vertical construction, we do have other programs at EDA, and you're best to look at those to fund that aspect. But to really get the sites cleaned up, which I think is really the goal of a lot of folks here at this Brownfields Roundtable, this is a great program. The eligible entities, it's both private sector and public sector, nonprofits, for-profits. The site has to be a brownfield site, but it's pretty broad in what that definition is. It is a competitive program, and so right now that means that we open a window of when we accept applications, and we grade all of them, we score them, and as long as you meet the minimum score, if we are not oversubscribed for a given round, then they can all sort of move through the next phases of our approval process. If we were to be oversubscribed, then just the highest ranking ones would move forward. We haven't seen an issue with that, so I wouldn't get too concerned about that. But you do want to write a good application when you put in your application. I think another really nice thing about this program is that not only is it remediation, but it also includes demolition, waste disposal, asbestos abatement, and things of that nature, which a lot of other programs don't provide for. So we're pretty excited about that. It also allows for the project, which is called a redevelopment project by law, to come in as actually just a remediation only project. And we find that that's actually the best way for most projects to come in, because it gets a little bit more complicated when you start talking about the vertical construction to be occurring at some point after the fact. You often at this stage of the game may not have all the financial pieces together to that point. So we do allow them to come in as remediation only projects. I think another key aspect here is you cannot be liable or responsible for the discharge or hazardous substance cleanup costs. And so that does put a real wrinkle into this, because in most cases, once you own the site in the state of New Jersey under the Spill Act, you do become liable. So, we do have some ways to address that, I think, on some of the other slides that we'll talk a little bit more about. And I will just say, we're looking at making improvements to the program, which might require some legislative action. And that is something we have our eye on, is that particular clause that's in the legislation. There is a potential to stack this with our other programs, including Aspire and Historic. And as I mentioned before, the tax credits can be sold, or as we say, they're transferable. You have to sell them for at least 85% of their value, unless you're doing a certain type of low-income housing tax credit project, in which case you could do it for 75%. We also have an eligibility wizard available on our website, so I wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Another key thing, though, that is not on the slide but is important to know is that prevailing wage does apply to the entire site. There is a construction prevailing wage, which is our typical prevailing wage requirement at EDA, and that continues with the site for 2 years following your project completion. And then we also have a building services prevailing wage, which continues for 10 years following the project completion. So we already talked about who's eligible and the sites that are eligible. So again, it's really just this idea that you're not in any way liable or responsible. So one of the ways you might want to sort of think about this is, getting through our whole process before you actually close on the property. So if there's an opportunity to delay the closing until after you've entered into your redevelopment agreement with us, which is by law right now what we're told, we cannot enter into a redevelopment agreement with anyone who is in any way liable or responsible. So if you can get to that milestone before closing, I think that's one strategy. Maybe leasing the site could be another strategy as well. As far as activities, again, remediation activities, demolition, asbestos abatement, the costs have to be reasonable. DEP will review those costs, and we are allowing for a contingency as well. As we mentioned before, the redevelopment project can be remediation only. It is a competitive program. Tax credit is a one-time tax credit issued in the year you complete your remediation. So again, you'll come in, get approved into our program, but you don't actually get the tax credit until after you've completed your remediation. And we already talked about prevailing wage. So that's kind of in a nutshell the Brownfield Redevelopment Incentive Program. Happy to have conversations with folks offline to talk about more in the details. If there's questions here, certainly at the end of my presentation, I'm happy to address those as well. But if you have a site in mind, go ahead and reach out to us. You can reach out to us in the chat here. Barbara's in the room. If you have questions, we'll set up a time to talk to you. The other program I wanted to talk about today is our Aspire program, and this has actually become a very popular program. This is really what I would call our real estate development program. So I mentioned before, if you're looking for money for vertical construction, this is a great program for that. One difference between this program and the Brownfields program, Aspire is limited in geography to where it's available, with one exception related to film projects. I think you can get it across the state if you're doing a film project. But suffice it to say, this is even more money. Awards are based on your financial need. It really does support those commercial, residential growth, and new construction and rehab. I would say what we're finding is that it has turned into a really great tool for financing affordable housing projects. That is a lot of what we are seeing come into the program. So as far as how this program works, I mentioned it's a lot of money. So they just actually revised this one a little bit. You can see on this map sort of where these certain eligible areas and enhanced areas are, but you can get up to 80% of eligible costs, up to 120 million if you're in what we call our government restricted municipalities of Atlantic City, Trenton, or Patterson. And you can get up to 60% of eligible costs, up to 90 million for low-income housing tax credit projects or projects that are located in one of these enhanced areas or qualified incentive tracts. And then otherwise, you're still eligible for 50% of eligible costs up to 60 million. And then there's a separate category we have for transformative projects, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about one of those later in this presentation, and that allows up to $400 million. One thing that's different, another thing that's different about this program as opposed to the other one, this is rolling applications, so it's not competitive. And also, rather than getting the tax credit at one time when you complete your remediation in the Brownfields one, in this, it's dispersed over 10 years. So the project size, these are pretty substantial projects, although I will say with the latest change in the legislation, we did reduce some of the size requirements. So it used to be that you had to be 100,000 square feet. Now you only have to be 50,000 square feet. And actually, if you, and this is for commercial projects, if you're in one of those GRMs, Atlantic City, Trenton, or Patterson, it actually only needs to be 25,000 square feet. And there's also a carve-out specific for healthcare and health services. So those projects actually only need to be 10,000 square feet. I mentioned earlier we had these transformative projects. These are like the really massive projects. I'm not going to go through all of this with you. But if you have one of these really big projects, we have a program for you that it's called the transformative piece of Aspire. So just to give you like a recap, just so to kind of put it in perspective, I mentioned that this has seemed to have turned into a really great tool for affordable housing. This slide's a couple months old. I'm thinking we've probably actually even have more approved by our board since then, but you're looking at over 1,300 affordable units being created and 2,000 plus market rate units that have been are being created thanks to this program. And you can see, you know, they're somewhat throughout the state. We have stuff in Camden, Trenton, Newark, Hoboken, so all different places. Lots of funding that's been awarded. 1.2 billion, over 1.2 billion has been awarded under this program. And I wanted to give you guys a little flavor of how this has worked with the Brownfield. So I'm thinking many of you may be familiar with this site. So it's now being called Riverton. And this was recently approved by our board to receive an Aspire tax credit project. It is in Sayreville. It is the former NL Industries property, or at least a portion of that property. This is going to be a massive, massive project. So this is one of those transformative projects that falls into that category. We're going to be building basically an entire small town along the river from scratch. They're looking to do 2,000 residential units and retail businesses. And the big thing that everybody talks about is it's anchored by Bass Pro Shops and then some other national chains. So the award amount for this one is the maximum, which is for transformative, of $400 million. So maybe some of you guys remember this sign when you would pass over on the Garden State Parkway, sort of heading south when you go over the Driscoll Bridge. This was the Dutch Boy paints. They made paint pigment. It was NL, which is National Lead Industries, NL. Maintained a paint manufacturing operation at the site until they shut down in 1982. But they owned that property from 1935 to 2005. The site had kind of deteriorated. At some point, it was abandoned, demolished, and stuff was buried in an on-site landfill. In 1996, the property was declared an area in need of redevelopment. And really, we've been talking about this project in New Jersey now for decades. The redevelopment area was later acquired from LNL through a settlement related to the condemnation. Part of that did cite the environmental degradation, which was filed by the borough, and they did a declaration of taking in 2005. NL then agreed to transfer the control of remediation over certain portions of the site under the redevelopment area. And then NL has retained remedial responsibility for other areas of the site, which remain underway at this time. And EPA has been very involved in this site as well. So you kind of, you can see sort of how long sometimes some of these really big projects take, but it's going to be an amazing project when it's finished. So not only is this part of all other kinds of programs, it's also part of the Sayreville Waterfront BDA. And this has been more than a $120 million remediation effort, including $20 million in HDSRF, and that has helped leverage $100 million in private sector funding. So the work at this site, the remediation, we're talking about a 418-acre portion of the site, is nearly complete. It's been probably about 15 years. They're anticipated to really begin the other type of construction, the redevelopment construction, in 2024, this year. Hopefully either they've already started or in the next few months. And then they will transform this into a $2.5 billion mixed-use redevelopment project. It is the largest and most complex redevelopment project, as far as I know, in New Jersey's history. So one of the biggest challenges at this site was the 40-acre lagoon. So again, if you can picture yourself driving along the parkway, for those of you who've been around in New Jersey for a while, I know it was like one of the things I would always do is I would drive over the Driscoll Bridge and I would say, what color is the lagoon today? So this was one of the biggest things that had to be addressed. It had been titanium dioxide waste byproducts from the National Lead manufacturing facility. And what they did is they used in situ stabilization. And so not only did that help, with the remediation, but also helped with the geotechnical standards for that soil. So they said they took 38,000 tons of Portland cement powder to be injected, and it took about a year to do that. And the price tag on just that part was $8 million. And that particular location is where I believe the Bass Pro Shop is intended to be located. And I just wanted to share this map with you because I do kind of keep talking about, it's a portion of the site. So again, the 418-acre, what we'll call redevelopment area, consists of 3 distinct parcels that are parcel A, B, and C. Parcel C is the area that has received the award from NJEDA. That's where this big project's going to be taking place. And the other parcels, though, I wanted to share with you. Parcel A is going to be set aside for waterfront access, open space, wetlands preservation, and 37 acres is deeded to the State of New Jersey Green Acres Program, and the County of Middlesex open space is held by the Sayreville Economic and Redevelopment Agency. Parcel B currently doesn't have any access to public roadways and is just designated as a future development site. But Parcel C is where I think a lot of the exciting stuff is scheduled to happen. Again, we're looking at 5 phases over the next 10 years. It's going to integrate housing, retail, service, entertainment spaces at street level. There's going to be rental apartments, office spaces on the upper levels of multi-story buildings. It's really going to have like this traditional downtown grid. We're talking about over 2 million square feet. Nearly 2/3 of the area is going to be for residential, and about 1/3 is going to be for commercial. And again, as I mentioned before, like we're finding this is a great tool for affordable housing. So we're looking at this site about 1,100 units of residential. So there'll be different mixes of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. And 20% of those units will be reserved for affordable. And so this is, I think, kind of somewhat of a current condition of the site. This is what, the site is envisioned to be. So again, talking about 400-acre site, 2 miles of frontage along the Raritan River and Raritan Bay. And again, it's going to be occurring in stages. We're looking at, again, sort of phase 1 is to include that Bass Pro Shops and other commercial outposts. I believe what they're talking about here is about 2 years to get that done. 800,000 square feet of retail and entertainment for this first part. And my understanding is this is going to be the largest Bass Pro Shop in the country. And then here's just some other renderings of this area. So, hopefully I got you a little bit excited about this program and what can, occur with it. And so many of us who've spent, our entire careers working on these kind of projects, it's really nice to see this come to fruition. So if you're interested in Aspire, it really does help get that transit-oriented, mixed-use, mixed-income development. Assist with the affordable housing. You can do office to residential rehab. You can do that standalone health center because, again, the rules and the legislation was recently revised to make it more favorable. And it does require that minimum, if you're doing residential, that a minimum of 20% of the units be affordable. And they do have to comply with what's called UHAC, which has several things, but I think the main thing is it talks about the distribution of the number of types of units. So it's not like you can build just all studio apartments or all 1-bedroom apartments. It talks about like the number of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom, and that's important because a lot of times you find that without those regulations, they are just building like the studios and the 1-bedrooms. And if you have a family, it's really nice to have those extra bedrooms. And as part of that program, we also do require a community benefits agreement. So if there are other things that the community is looking for, that's an opportunity to incorporate that into the projects. And then lastly, I did want to mention we also have our Food Desert Relief Supermarket Tax Credit. This is open right now. We are accepting applications on a rolling basis. So there is an opportunity with this particular program to finance supermarkets. So, take a look at our website. You can get more information on this program there, but I did want to just make sure folks are aware that that's happening. And we also have our historic property reinvestment program or historic preservation tax credit program. This works really well when you marry it up with the federal tax credit program. So there's opportunities under this program if you have a brownfield. We also have open right now is called our local property acquisition. This is a pilot program. It is a grant program. There's really sort of 2 buckets of money here, but we are providing funding to really like your municipalities, counties, redevelopment agencies, and nonprofits for the acquisition of vacant sites in order to really facilitate and catalyze that future redevelopment. So we have, like I said, 2 buckets. One is called sort of the strategic public use bucket. So that's where things like you might be doing a pedestrian plaza, a pocket park, community garden, public access walkways, parking lots, and garages or other kinds of similar spaces. And then the other bucket of funding is really for that future development. So that's like the mixed use. And again, the affordable housing component we talked about in Aspire applies here as well. Transit-oriented development, cultural arts, performing arts, commercial manufacturing, industrial, and research and laboratory. So again, you know, with this piece for the future development, your maximum award is $4 million. For the strategic public use, the maximum award is $1 million. And this is, again, open now, but the deadline is coming up soon. So May 20th, so take a look at that. And again, this is to acquire those vacant parcels. We also have our film and digital media tax credit program. So just to let you guys know, we recently reopened a piece of it that allows for a certain designation. So you can, if you are a film production facility, and the reason I bring this up is because we are seeing this on Brownfield. So in Newark, what was once the Seth Boyden housing is now going to be a studio, and it's being developed by Lionsgate, and they are one of the people that has the studio partner designation. And so I wanted to bring it to people's attention because, you know, this is a Brownfield site. This was supported, I'm pretty sure, I know by US EPA funding, and I believe by lots of other funding that got it there. So if you're working on these kind of sites and you're working with film production facilities, just bring it to their attention that we do have these programs that allow them to then unlock separate funding, sort of their own bucket of funding to help them either make the films themselves, or if they're going to be leasing the space out to their tenants, they can take advantage of some enhanced tax credits under that program. And so that is everything I have from the EDA perspective. I hope you guys are inspired and are looking to do some of your other projects and bring them in and talk to us. I do have our email address listed here, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We're going to, before we ask our virtual audience whether they have any questions, I have a follow-up question, but first, before we get to the follow-up question, thank you for all those different incentives and the great partnership we have with EDA. I'm going to have a follow-up question about the Brownfield Redevelopment Incentive Program in a moment. You brought up the amazing Riverton development in Sayreville, but I also wanted to add to your great presentation, Elizabeth, that our program, that the Sayreville Waterfront Brownfield Development Area was designated in 2008, I believe. Could have been 2007. I think it was 2008. So our office stepped up to the table knowing the challenge of this site. In addition to what Elizabeth mentioned, it was one of the worst PCB contaminated sites in the state and maybe the worst radiation contaminated site in the state. And I want to acknowledge Tony Finley, who has been working on that Brownfield development area for 2008, has been tireless in making sure the project moves forward, gets permits, set up critical meetings with many agencies. We're at this great spot only because of Tony's dedication to this site and to his work in the Brownfields office. So I want to let Tony say a few moments. And by the way, this huge project, without $20 million of HDSRF grant monies on the table from both DEP and EDA, that's what catalyzed the initial redevelopment team and Sayreville to step into the huge commitment that we all knew this site was. Again, 418 acres of some of the worst contaminated land and waters in the state. So I want Tony to say a few words because without Tony, we wouldn't be here today.
Guys, this has been a real one of the most complex projects I've ever been involved in, both from the remediation end as well as the redevelopment end. There's a lot of players involved. We had some significant delays because the first redeveloper, he took on the project and he got, he got about a quarter way through it, and then the project was just too much for him. We had to get, that redeveloper had left the project. We got about a 5-year delay. We brought in a new redeveloper, and they just took the project and just moved forward. The project is amazing. One of the things that I always look back on is when we needed an egress and ingress coming off the parkway, and we always thought that was going to be the toughest thing to do. But we were able to coordinate with DOT, and we were able to get that egress come on real quickly. And we thought the remediation was going to go a lot smoother, but we ran into some significant radiological contaminants. I mean, it just probably tripled the cost of the remediation. One of the biggest problems we had was actually trying to find a place to put the rad material. We were going to go to Pennsylvania, then at one time we were going to go down to Alabama. Then we finally found a home in Texas, which was even more complex because when we got down there, they wanted us to solidify it a little more. There was a lot of those type of technical issues. There was funding issues because initially the project was estimated somewhere about $40 million in remediation, but it's probably about $150 million and probably going up too. The folks at the EDA came to the table with a lot of financial incentives, so that's also helped too. And the HDSRF, like Frank mentioned, is really what got this off the ground. We're able to bring $20 million to the table, and then we're able to enter into a 4-party agreement with the NL, the county, Sayreville, and the redevelopment. That really got it going. It's a project that's got a lot of incentives, it's got a lot of momentum, it's going to happen. And when it's done, I always refer to it as like building a municipality within a municipality. And I think that's what's good about that also too. And, it's really good that our office got involved and, kind of took the lead for the DEP, so that's because the expertise is here. Another project that you mentioned too, that we're involved in is the Set Boynard. We're involved with that also too, and we're managing that project in our office. So these are the type of projects we take on, and, we're ready to do it because we have the expertise. And, our folks from EPA is always there to help us out also if we run out of funds. So thanks again, guys.
Thank you, Tony. Right. It's only possible with dedicated folks like Tony, our EPA friends, and of course, Middlesex County, Sayreville Economic Development Corporation, and NL, who also was party to this very complex meeting. You want to say one more thing, Tony? Oh, no, Tony.
We meet regularly on this project. Every quarter, I'm up there. Every 3 months, we're up there, even more than that. But I mean, at least every quarter, I'm up there meeting with all the folks, all the contractors, all the environmental specialist guys, and just kind of walk the site and think it. And the commissioner was out there recently too, Frank. You forgot to mention that because we're almost near the completion. When we rolled out the BDA expansion, we used that site as a backdrop to roll that out. We looking to go vertical in the spring with the bass boor. And I know we've been saying that over and over, but I think this time it's really going to happen, Frank.
Thank you, Tony. As Tony mentioned, the Commissioner LaTourette and dignitaries from EPA were at the Sayreville site on October 30th announcing our new applications for new BDA designations. And my follow-up for Tony quickly is, has Speaker Craig Coughlin taken you out to lunch yet? Okay. Well, I mean, and that's, a testament to all levels of government needed to do these complex projects like the former NL site in Sayreville. Thank you, Tony. Do we have any questions from our virtual audience before I ask Elizabeth a question?
Yep, there's one question from Rick Scheuer. The term vacant, does that include abandoned structures?
So I think you're probably asking about the local property acquisition grant, which does talk about a vacant site, building, facility, or collection of properties. So I'm not as deeply involved in this project, but I would say based on just that definition alone that, yes, an abandoned structure would be part of the type of property that would be eligible for this local property acquisition grant program.
Thank you.
Is our friend Rick Scheuer have a follow-up? Rick can't type as fast as Elizabeth talks, maybe. Any questions from our, yes, hold on a second. Bring this to you. Introduce yourself and your affiliation. Thank you.
Hi, this is Felix. I represent the Department of State at the Office of Planning Advocacy. And my question could be a little bit more technical, but for remediation purposes, have there been research on nature-based solutions like composting at a large scale that could reduce cost expenses?
So from an EDA perspective, that's not something we have taken on, but I'm thinking DEP and EPA might be better able to answer that question. It's, from our perspective, where if it's deemed remediation, it's eligible for our programs, and that's sort of the important part coming from our programs. But certainly, looking at things like nature-based solutions, I think is something that overall, as a state, we're looking at whether it's remediation or we're looking at like flood protection.
Thank you. I also have another question. Again, it might be something that you may be able to answer. Is there a proper definition for affordable regarding affordable housing, such as meeting low income families' income, or something like below the poverty line?
Yes. So we rely on our partners at our other agencies, which I believe it's HMFA is the one who has the rules associated with what is, like the definitions of the different types of affordable housing. And then, as I mentioned, there's that term UHAC, UHAC, and that really provides much more detail about what is required when we're talking about affordable housing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions from our audience here?
And Frank, while you're going over there, I do want to say, I agree with you completely that this is like such when we talk about things like the NL project or Seth Boyden, Lionsgate Film Studio, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that happens from like a Tony Findley that is doing so much for 20, 30 years to make these projects happen and shine. And it's unfortunate that I feel like it's like the unsung hero, but I'm so glad we have an opportunity at a place like this to recognize those people that have, poured their heart and soul into making these projects happen.
Good morning, Elizabeth. This is Shanine. Had a quick question for you in regards to the Brownfields Planning and Assessment Services. Is there a funding limit for the projects? And for the Brownfields Planning, could it be any phase of Brownfields redevelopment?
Well, so we actually are working closely with your department, Shanine, as well on that. And I think I would have to defer on both of those questions, but I think the maximum allowed per site, actually we are defaulting to the maximum that EPA allows per site. So unless somebody else is actually managing that program right now, which is Melissa Dolinsky. So she may have made some tweaks to it since I was last looking at a detailed lens of it to be able to answer the questions about the maximum. But I don't think it's been something we've run into yet at this stage, is that we've run up against that yet. And then
Okay.
the second part of your question, I'm sorry, you said
I'm
the
sorry,
maximum.
can the services for Brownfields Planning be used at any phase of the redevelopment? So let's say you did the assessment, you did the cleanup, and now you need some maybe assistance with reuse design. Is that part of the service that's offered?
It can be. So again, we would actually, work closely with you, Shanine, to make sure it falls within, the requirements of our cooperative agreement with EPA. But yeah, we're looking to do lots of planning services as well. We think that that's like a nice way to sort of really help move these projects along. And I know, there was a time that EPA offered a standalone grant for planning, the area-wide planning grant, that doesn't exist anymore. And so a lot of those kinds of services, like this is a good way to access those kinds of services as well, is through, using this kind of grant.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for the presentation.
Oh, we've got one more question.
Is there time? Go for it, Rachel. If
One
there's not.
question. Yeah, and this is from Joe Hawkrider, who manages the Perth Amboy Brownfield Development Area. He just wants to know if you've made this presentation to the League of Municipalities.
We have talked to the League of Municipalities about, I think, some of the different brownfield programs, and then separately, I'm pretty sure our real estate division has spoken about Aspire, but I don't think this has not come like as a single thing where we've had all of these different pieces really tied together. And I can tell you that the stuff about Sayreville has definitely not been one of the things that we have done with League, at least not yet. But if you think it's a good idea, we could certainly submit it for this coming year.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth mentioned the word stacking and provided a few examples. And she introduced the Brownfield Redevelopment Incentive Program. And I'm thinking about early in my career, some of my colleagues were working in Jersey City on some Chrome sites, again, very much like the NL site, thinking that these sites are never going to be redeveloped. And we're working, my office is working closely with Elizabeth and her team on 2 mixed-use developments on the former Chrome sites in Jersey City right now, Bayfront 1 and Bayfront 3. So, again, taking a very challenging sites and making sure they're safe for mixed-use development. So thank you, Elizabeth, to you and your team, because some of the most challenging sites in New Jersey are being redeveloped with the incentives and the hard work of both of our agencies. We are going to take a 5-minute break till 10:35, and then our friends at EPA are going to speak at 10:35. Hi, everybody. We're going to end the break. I'm sorry it was a few minutes longer than we anticipated. Everybody comfortable here? Our virtual audience comfortable? Okay, so again, I'm sorry we're restarting a few minutes late. My name is Frank McLaughlin. For those who are just joining us now, I manage the Office of Brownfield and Community Revitalization for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. We had Keith Henderson from the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs on the agenda today. Keith, unfortunately, is not able to join us. He was going to provide an update of some new affordable housing regulations, and we were going to invite him back for the next quarter because obviously affordable housing is an important issue in our state, and also brownfields is a great nexus for future affordable housing. We are super lucky to have not only the EPA brownfields experts, but experts from other programs in the Circle and Removal Action today from our friends at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So I think we're going to start with Terry Wesley, but then we're going to move over to the CERCLA and Removal Action folks.
And I'm sorry that this slide was not updated, but in addition to Terry and Shanine, Ashita Patel and Joseph Rottola are also here from EPA.
Thank you so much there on that, Rachel. So they told me not to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So the other day, we had to go through an eclipse. Wonderful site where there wasn't any clouds necessarily.
Your eyes okay, Terry?
Eyes are perfectly fine, even though it's tearing here because of you. But the fact of the matter is, when we talk about brownfields, we need to take this off because we're always bright. I gotta laugh. Good. I gotta laugh. Good. It was cheesy, but I wanted to do it anyway. So, I know. Moving ahead, because One of the things that I just want to mention is, we talk about the infrastructure law in and of itself. We talked to you guys and mentioned there's $1.5 billion in fusion. Well, we've been saying that for a couple of years now. And while that money is still there, the monies are starting to sunset in the next couple of years. So we have to be prepped and ready while we are so eager and available to you all. Our folks on our program, always willing to help and assist. We know there's going to be that shortfall coming. And we want to best prepare you guys for that reduction, that glide path, in such a way that the important work that you guys are doing continues to go forward. So you're going to be hearing throughout this presentation, not just necessarily brownfields, but these other programs that exist, particularly now through the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we'll get to those in a second. So for today, thank you so fast. We're going to show you the money. And so we're going to give you a couple of updates first on some of the funding programs that we have available. We could turn to the next slide, please. So just want to let everybody know, the FY24 MAC, that's the Multi-Purpose Assessment and Cleanup Grant Programs. In the phase that we're in right now, we just completed all the reviews, and we're currently in the final selection phase. That's going to be taking place in a week and a half, and sometime in May, we're expecting to have the national announcement. I'm a little excited because I know there were some fantastic projects that were submitted, and hopefully they all, or most of them, will be going forward. But we'll keep you guys updated on that once that announcement comes through. I'm not sure if anyone in particular, had applied for funding under supplemental for revolving loan fund. It's one of our unique programs. I know Elizabeth talked a little bit about the funding that she's using under her RLF to help support some of the projects there locally. Another earthquake? What's it? Oh, I'm seeing a whole bunch of shaking going on, and Elvis Presley is not here. So anyway, that particular grant program is sort of unique as a supplemental program, and sort of it provides funding on top of an existing grant that's already in place to help support continuing remediation efforts underway. It could go up to $5 million. Once again, you see that number because of the fact of the bill funding. That's why you see those large numbers that are there that we love. But unfortunately, those are going to start decreasing, and we're going to have to work off of funding that's what's known as de-obligations, funds from grants that are now closing out to now help continue support. So we're getting in that phase, and it's letting everybody know. Not to scare anybody, but just to let you know things are coming in the next couple of years. RLF technical assistance. So we know there's a lot of challenges in folks, particularly newer grantees in the RLF program and how to manage. So we went out for a particular award for having someone or one entity that is to help support those RLF grantees. I'm not sure who applied, but there's $3 million available in the technical assistance grant. And it closed on March 1st. So we'll look to see who that entity that was selected is. Lastly, FY24 Circle Section 128.8. Well, folks, this is really the state's Brownfields program that we help support here at DEP. We just completed the round of identifying allocations throughout the country. I think we had all 50 states, 118. I mean, Ashita, you know the details, but it's really one of the large-scale number of applicants that came in to receive funding. So we didn't have enough, so we have to consider other factors in terms of that. But we do believe we are still handsomely providing funding for New Jersey DEP to help them with their program. So we're working with Tony as a point person, and Shanine's a project manager on the New Jersey DEP Brownfields grant that is in the 128. So they're working together to make that happen, the funding award process in the next couple of months. So anyway, those are the updates on the FY24. For us, our federal fiscal year ends on September 30th, so we're getting ready to move into the FY25 phase. So let's move on to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to the person that, yes, I'm going to say this, and I hope she could look at me while I'm having this conversation. But this individual is known not just as the regional Brownfields Job Training Coordinator, but she is also a national expert on Brownfields job training. I've been in meetings where she's been called upon by headquarters to help support developing of their notice of funding opportunities, and it's just something to see how she just wields the power of understanding job training and all the components that are related to it to make it happen. So I'm going to turn it over to Shanine. Would you like to come up here?
Shanine Mitchell, come on down.
I'd like to buy a vowel. No, I'm kidding. So
That'll
right
cost you
now,
200.
we are in the process of preparing the cooperative agreements for the FY24 Brownfield Job Training Grants and starting to move into what FY25 looks like. So we're making a couple little tweaks to the program. One of them being that now you can apply as a coalition, which is amazing. We're not offering more money, but this allows a lot of smaller communities to come together to put together a really good job training application. We want to see more communities come into the job training program. Again, our money is designed to recruit, train, and place individuals that have been impacted by brownfields. We're looking at underserved communities, marginalized communities to be participants in the job training program. And it's really great. I think on the regional level, we have about a 74% placement rate in our program. We have the folks that are eligible for our program are very similar to the assessment and the cleanup. It's a nonprofits. We see universities. We've seen state supply. NJDP had a job training grant for Camden. So we have a lot of eligible entities that can apply for our program. And then for this year, you have to draw down 70% if you're an existing grantee. Only fair for all of the smaller communities that want to come in. And the request for job training applications is expected to be released sometime in May. So if you have any questions about applying, just feel free to reach out to me. Again, really great program, especially with all of the cleanup and assessment work that's going on in New Jersey. I think that we should be able to train locally and hire locally to put really decent people into sustainable jobs and provide pathways out of poverty. So that's what I got. Thank you, guys.
She gets an applause. Fantastic. No, thank you, Shanine. Really appreciate it. And really, that message is important. You know, if we can train people locally to do all the great work that's happening locally in terms of remediation as well as assessment work, that's a win-win situation, right, for everybody. So please, if you have any questions about the program, please reach out to Shanine on that. So I want to get into the other aspects of how our program and its tentacles reach out. And in particular, we're talking about under the Inflation Reduction Act, right? So yes, we've been talking about Bill a lot, but we're finding ourselves now in the IRA world, and not because it's tax time and that you have to try to not hide your money, but placing it appropriately in IRAs. But clearly, there's going to be now a drive, to say the least, in terms of the Brownfield program serving as a conduit for many of the efforts underway by the agency in the areas of environmental justice and climate justice. And in particular, where we talked about $1.5 billion that was made available under the bill to support brownfields projects, there's $2 billion available under the community change grants under the environmental and climate justice program. And so there's a couple of things coming up. I would want to invite Ashita Patel from our group. As note, Ashita is our Brownfields climate change point of contact. Even though she's been in our program for a few years, she is a dynamic individual and really wielding some of her prior experience working with New York City Green Remediation Program and others to help support this work. So I may introduce Ashita Patel.
Yeah, so the community change grants, they're not managed by the Brownfields program, but we really are, okay. We really are making sure that all of our communities are aware of this great opportunity. So $2 billion are in this pot of funding. In terms of funding available for communities, they're expecting about $10 to $20 million to be awarded to the communities that will be applying. There are smaller funding opportunities available for that, I think range from like $1 to $3 million. They are accepting applications on a rolling basis. So it already started. It started last November. Applications will be accepted until November 21st of this year. And the whole process of applying for these community change grants is kind of different than what we, I think, are used to. There are a couple of tracks you can choose from. So in terms of like eligible activities, that covers a lot. There's anything that's related to climate reduction, pollution prevention, brownfield redevelopment. If you read the notice of funding opportunity, there's a lot more information. But while you're applying for these grants, if you happen to not pass, you will have a debrief, but then you can also resubmit in this cycle to hopefully get funding. So there's a real push to have this funding be available to communities that need it. We really are focusing in on that. It has to benefit disadvantaged communities, especially communities that have been impacted by legacy pollution and historical disinvestment. So more information is available on the website, but just wanted to get everyone's attention to this because it really is, I think, like once in a lifetime, right? Like, have we seen anything like this before? So yeah, if you can go to the next slide, please. And then the slide after that. And then just to quickly introduce, there are 2 technical assistants that will be offered in conjunction with this grant. So if you're applying for this grant, because it is a lot of money, there's also technical assistance, I think up to $200 million available overall. So these technical assistance providers will help the communities prepare the grant application, help manage the funds, figure out the project scope. There's 2 types. There's this one, and then I think if you go to the next slide, this goes into a little bit more detail about community change, equitable resilience, technical assistance, certain like what kind of assistance will be provided. Again, more information is available on the website, but I think it's really cool how you can apply for this pot of money, funding, but then also have technical assistance to help kind of guide you through this process, and the projects have to be completed within 3 years. And I think that's it. Is there another slide?
Ashita, did you say
Oh.
10 to 20 million to each community? Obviously, it's a competitive grant, but that's a lot of money for climate and environmental justice, and associated with brownfields that's great. 10 to 20 million. I see JR taking notes here. 10 to 20 million dollars for Trenton.
And then this is one more technical assistance, a little bit different than the community change grants, but it's called the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers Program, also referred to as TICTACs. So they offer grant support to all communities in terms of just getting access to this federal grant world. So building capacity, developing applications. So if any community in New Jersey is interested in applying, you can contact the West Harlem Environmental Action Technical Assistance Collaborative, also known as WEACT, to help out with this. Now I think that's it, unless you have anything to add.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ashita. And I think you hit on the point there, Frank, when you talked about looking at JR and others, particularly like the Saraville project, waterfront project, right? I mean, it's there, climate resiliency, right? I mean, it's built into the projects that we're doing. So why not tap into some of this wonderful funds that's available, right? So please, if you have any further questions, I'd like to let folks know in the presentation itself, all those hyperlinks you see, those are active right to the website. So you don't have to worry about it. You just go, once you get this copy of this presentation, you'll be able to access all that information on EPA's website as well as the other technical assistance centers and organizations. So thank you so much for that. So we have a unique opportunity here. You guys understand, so internally, sometimes, we get these projects and they're like, la-di-da-di-da, we're on the site. And then we get this call, and it's like, we got these tanks on our site here that we're assessing, and it's like 20 tanks, and we don't know what's in them. There's no labels. There's a little bit of leaking going on. I'm scared. I'm about to run for the hills. Who do I call? Well, I'll tell you who I call. It's not Ghostbusters. It's Joe Rotola. So I'm going to call Joe up here, and he's going to talk about this wonderful removal program that we have at the agency. Joe.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, so those of you who don't know or do know, the Brownfields was part of Superfund years back. And back then we had a really good relationship. Goes back to Vince Petrozello, who's probably on this. We do, and that's what I was going to say. We still do. We maintain that relationship over the years. So when I was offered the opportunity to speak here, I didn't want to miss up on it, miss the opportunity, because it's a good opportunity to educate you more on what we do and what we can provide for municipalities in the states. So I'm going to be going to another roundtable up in New York State in 2 weeks. But I have to pull this together pretty quick. So this is something that I do we have brown bag lunches for new folks. And this is sort of like a quick education on the removal program, what we do, what our capabilities are, and how we might be able to help you out. So we can start the slides. And that wasn't an earthquake, right? Because I'm convinced my house is right on the epicenter, because I had a bad experience last week. But in any case, all right, so let's see. Yeah, so I don't know if you have my presentation there. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, Terry, did you slip another one of your talks in here in front of Joe's?
Yeah, what's going on? I only have 57 slides, so.
Well, while we're waiting,
I think you have to send it.
Joe has been an amazing partner with DEP for 20 plus years.
39.
Well, at least
we go back
personally
about the
for
same.
me, about 20 years. And I hope he gets into, we talk about catalyzing projects like the HDS ref with the Riverton project in Sayreville. Joe has catalyzed, and his team have catalyzed a number of projects in some of our most distressed cities. And when you ask for help, EPA shows up, not just our Brownfields friends. And I personally want to thank Joe, because the EPA mobile laboratory that goes around the country to do amazing work showed up on the Harrison Avenue landfill in Camden in May of 2006, when we had 6 months to complete a PA, SI, RI, remedial action work plan by September 2006 to secure $59 million from the estate of Joan Kroc. And without Joe and his team and his mobile laboratory, we would not have gotten that work done in 6 months as required by the National Salvation Army. So I personally want to thank Joe. There's many other projects in Camden and other cities that he's personally helped us with, but that one was without him, and without the EPA mobile laboratory, and without the $200,000 assessment grant, we never would have gotten that project off the ground. And so thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I have to say, you're only as good as the people that work with you. And I've been blessed with a great staff for over the years that I've been with EPA. So this is a general overview. If I get invited to the next quarterly, I'll have a more specific Brownfields presentation. It was what we did have way back when we were together in the same division. We had this Brownfields Buddies program. And what we did was...
Consider yourself invited to the next quarterly roundtable. Harry's just going to have to share the stage a little bit.
And it really worked out well, because what we did, our staff, they're called on-scene coordinators. And the reason why they're called on-scene coordinators is when we do a job, a cleanup, they're on site every day. And they're really active in the community. JR can tell you we're working in Trenton, and we're probably going to be there for another 10, 20 years. We're actually looking to get an office, and my goal, and thanks to Fred Mumford, who was a previous DEP employee, he referred this site to us in Trenton. I'm getting off a little bit, but there's some humor to it. It includes 6 different areas of Trenton that were impacted by historical potteries. And my goal before I retire is to list the state environmental agency building on the MPL. But in any case, that's just a joke. Nobody's laughing, so I guess that's not good. But in any case, so we're going to try to reactivate that program. I have a list of all the grantees and municipalities, and hopefully we'll be able to get staff involved in the meetings so that if something comes up that you think we might be able to help you out, it'll be a fast track through the system. But all right, we can continue through the slides. I have to go pretty quick on this. So just distinguishing between remedial and removal programs. We're part of Superfund. Remedial is obviously the MPL sites, and removal As you'll see during the slides, we do a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be an MPL site. It could be anything that's referred to us by anyone. But what we always do, we have a formal referral process, whether it's internal or external. We always go to the states first to get their agreement that they want us to look at a site or evaluate. Next slide. And this is just the branch. Lost a lot of people over the past several years to retirement. But, we have 3 sections. Next slide. And hope we should probably share this with you so you can go over this later if you have any questions after this meeting. So we do removal assessments. This is sort of the front door. Sites come in, we do assessments, determine them for eligibility, removal actions. We do have an enforcement component, but municipal liability has always been a big issue, and we have better policy now where we're more lenient towards that. Where in the past, municipalities have foreclosed on properties without really doing their due diligence, and it got ugly for a while, but we're working in Perth Amboy now. Right, another Brownfield site where, thought it was going to be a simple PCB cleanup. Right. Yeah. Old Goldberg junkyard. So, but in any case, the liability issues with municipalities are much better. We worked it out there. It was very smooth, and we're going to be spending a lot of money trying to make a park out of it. So, but problem is PCBs and some bombs and some white phosphorus. So
yeah, no big deal, right? Yeah,
No.
thank you, Joe, for your patience with Perth Amboy and us.
No,
We
I
had
think
put
it's working out
HDSRF money on the table, but
Yeah.
we ran into some pretty big problems
Oh,
when we
yeah,
did
yeah.
the PCB removal when the soil started
Great team.
spontaneously
Yeah,
combusting.
moving-
So thank goodness that EPA again answered the phone that day.
Yeah. I think we're in a good place right now to start doing some work. Sorry? Yes, that's the initial estimate. Yeah.
Technical assistance, but also with $25 million.
Yeah, that'll be phased out over the years because our budget is only $15 million a year, but yeah. So, enforcement and then remedial support. We're one of the few regions that actually get very involved in MPL sites. Slide, please. And these are different functions that we do in the branch. It's sort of like a mini division. So data coordination, contracts, health and safety, everything is in the branch. And we support other groups within the division. Next slide. And these are examples of some of the activities. We not only get involved in the regional activities, but we also participate. We help each other regions. So, we've been involved in the World Trade Center. Dan and I were detailed to the World Trade Center for almost 2 years. We do all the major floods, the shuttle disaster, BP oil spill, California wildfires, most recently Maui wildfires. We have people there now, water supply issues, and then the regular removal work. But we support other regions. Over the past couple of years, wildfires alone have taxed us out staff-wise, especially with the retirements. So next slide. I'm going to go pretty quick through this. I sort of explained the referral system. This is sort of the way it works. Referral, we do a removal site evaluation, which could consist of just sampling a couple of drums and determine eligibility right away, or like Frank said, on Harrison Avenue, it was an expensive investigation. And then we do a decision document to fund it, as in the case of Goldberg. And we get authority to do that, and then we assign staff to it to manage it from start to completion. Next slide. And this is just, I won't bore you with the section of the National Contingency Plan, but if you look it up, and we'll have another slide that goes through the eligibility criteria. There's real strict eligibility criteria, but at the same time, we have a lot of leverage and discretion on what we do. Next slide. So this is just a rundown of what happens when a site comes in. Like I said, sampling, determine whether it meets eligibility criteria. Some of these assessments could take a year. It depends on the site, but there's no site too small or too big, maybe too big, based on our funding, but we usually fund it over the fiscal years if it's a very large site. And then reporting out, and we're real good at doing removal action reports because we know what you need as far as data goes for redevelopment. And we like to see our sites get redeveloped because a lot of them have not. But with this big infusion of money with both the state and federal government, I'm happy to get involved in this again. Okay, next slide. Okay, and these are some of the criteria that we need. It sounds pretty, high threat, but mostly based on immediate threats, threat to public health, and then the environment in that order. So if there's obviously an explosion risk or something like that, drums that are leaking, we can get out there pretty quick, stabilize it, and then deal with the assessment later. And we work very closely with Bob Van Fossen's group too. He has the emergency side and then the site remediation side of DEP. Next slide. I'm going to go pretty quick, so if anybody has a question, stop me. I don't want to. All right. And these are the type of activities we do. We do a lot of vapor intrusion now. Our lead policy has changed. The numbers dropped down to 200, which is what we're doing in Trenton. So it's major impact on what we do and what sites are eligible, especially on residential properties. We have a lot of residential properties here in Trenton that are over that number, and we're going to be taking action soon on those properties, and schools and parks. So it could consist of anything. It could be just put up a fence. You need a fence put up just to buy time and, control access from trespassers or whatever to prevent exposure. We do temporary relocation, obviously excavation, stabilization, and then removal, the full removal action of any kind of soil or hazardous substances that are present. Next slide. And these are our limitations, but they're not really our limitations. There's ways around them. Usually 1 year and 2 million. And there's criteria that we have to meet in order to extend it. Very few sites these days are less than $2 million and take less than 1 year. Disposal, we're running into a lot of disposal issues, and just the money doesn't go as far as it used to anymore. And they'll take an act of Congress to change this, but there's provisions for us to continue working on sites beyond 1 year and over $2 million. Next slide. And these are the types of jobs. I'm going to show you pictures. We're going to cruise through the pictures. I'll stop every once in a while where it's applicable to the Brownfields program, but these are the types of friable asbestos is a big thing, especially in New York. By the way, in New York, they have this deferral process down. We spend about 90% of our money in New York. Very little in New Jersey for some reason, but
Come again, Joe?
about 90% of our funding is in New York. And yeah, we have
We got to work a little harder, JR.
So, but yeah, and a lot of that is asbestos, and we have real strict criteria. Right? Those of you that are working on sites that have asbestos, there has to be a release to the environment. So, you could have a secure building, board and chemical, part of board and chemical, which was a brownfields, and a removal action had, 50% of the building was secure, and we only could do the parts of the building that were presenting a threat of a release. Actual, and the language is actual or potential. So like I said, we have leadway in what we can do. But these are examples. Oil is another issue. I think we dealt with JR on some of the oil issues. Oil is funded by the Coast Guard, and they have no forgiveness. They will go after anybody. So whether it's, there's history in New York State where people bought property, hunting property or whatever, and there were abandoned, wells there that they didn't even know about, and they go after them. So we caution everybody that before we activate the OPA fund, which is done by another branch, make sure that all those issues are in order on liability. Next slide. And these are the types. This is like asbestos, just like you can just keep on clicking through. I'll tell you when to stop if you can, please. Just open windows. Roofs are falling down. Unfortunately, in some cases, we have to wait until the building falls down before we can do it. Then it costs 10 times more money to do it. Working on trying to change that policy, but this is a good example. There's a clip in here that's an amazing clip. But this is Charlestown Mall in New York State. This is currently being evaluated. We finished the cleanup. It was in Dan's group. Spent many years there, and it was a good example of the asbestos issues that we have. We couldn't do the whole building. Only part of it was presenting a threat of a release to the environment. And lo and behold, somehow or another, caught on fire. Massive fire. And we ended up, I don't know how much money we spent there, but we spent a lot of money. Demoed the whole building as ACM, got rid of it. And now one of the energy commissions in New York State are looking at it for storage and for solar. So hopefully that'll happen. It's good to see these sites get put to good use. That's just examples of asbestos. Next slide. And you can just click through, I'll stop you. These are just examples of some of the sites we've done in the past. So if you see any of this, anything that looks familiar on one of your sites, call us up.
I try not to loiter too long around drums, Joe.
Yeah, right.
You know,
yeah.
I got a family to raise still.
Some of them. Drum slides. We do tanks, above ground tanks, underground tanks, if they have anything in them. You can keep on going. Yeah, okay, okay. These are all actual sites that we've done, lab packs. These dangerous sites, these lab pack jobs, unknowns. Shock sensitives where we have to do relocations and evacuations. Waste oil. Try to qualify oil as waste oil, as that gets us into the circular realm. So, and then obviously soil contamination. The general color should be coming up here, which was a massive soil excavation. This is Barry Bronze. So I don't know what the status of that is. I thought it was being redeveloped, but yeah, it's a general color. This was nasty, nasty site. Percent levels, 20% lead. And I think that's been redeveloped now.
My recollection, Joe, is some of the general color paint lagoon contamination was underneath some of those garden apartments that you just showed.
Yeah, yeah. We
It's
don't
in
usually
Camden,
do
New Jersey.
digs this deep, but we justified doing it based on TCLP analysis and impacted groundwater. So there was source material. Usually have depth limitation. This is a radiation site in Lewiston, New York. Unfortunately, people, the radiation impacted one of the residents of the home, and she passed away while we're doing this cleanup. But we actually had to go under the building here and do some underpinning. And this is Red Hook ball fields. It was impacted by lead smelters back when we did the lead smelter initiative. Hundreds of sites throughout the country, and we entered into an order with the city of New York, and just over the past couple of months, they completely renovated all their ball fields. Beautiful place. I mean, it was beat up so bad, high exposure, heavily used by soccer players, baseball, football, all hours of the day and night, and cinders all over. So that's done. All AstroTurf now. And then we also do a lot of vapor mitigation. So these are before and after. This is Cinnaminson site where we actually had water in the basement. So it was a challenge. We had to pump and remediate. And we also get large facilities like Tonawanda Coke. 3 days before Christmas, about 8 years ago, we were handed the keys of Tonawanda Coke, and we actually hired people that were working there and continued operating the Coke plant until it was decommissioned. People walked. The owners of Tonawanda Coke walked. Very intense, stressful year there. Over a year, actually. And this is Votoys, which is another good example of a nightmare. GE, mercury contamination, developed some very unique ways of evaluating mercury in soil. And the site's been cleaned up, and now it's under the LSRP program, and the developer plans to start construction soon. It's in Harrison, by the way. And then we do, all kinds of incidents involving train derailments, and this is Paulsboro. Pretty nasty vinyl chloride release there. And this is under ER support. And large-scale disasters, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires, you name it. And like I said, I don't know if you guys deal with a lot of MPL sites, but if you do, we do a lot of work on MPL sites, but we're always there to assist our remedial counterparts. Next slide. And these are some examples. Hopefully during the next quarterly, we'll be specific to the brownfield sites we've worked on. As you can see, most of them are in New York State. Rolling steel, Dan Horke was the OSC many years ago. He did rolling steel. It was first start recycling steel at that plant. How many millions of dollars did we recover? $4 million in steel. So, I mean, a lot of that was overlooked in the earlier days of the program. Raritan-based slag, NL, working on that now. Lipari, Coneville. Hudson River was a very interesting project. This is just to give you a magnitude of the job. Some of these are PRP, responsible party funded. Some of them are fund lead. Most of these are fund lead. But at Hudson River, we actually had to put a water line under the Hudson River. So they used directional drilling, incredible technology. And they came within like a foot of where they wanted to come to when the boring came out of the other side of the river. There's a picture of it here. Well, yeah, that's the directional drilling under the river. All part of the Hudson River cleanup. Communities along the Hudson River did not want us to start the dredging unless there was an alternate water supply, since they pumped water from the river. And this was a prerequisite to us moving forward on the cleanup, or GE moved forward on the cleanup. It's Coneville South, Morris County, right around the corner from me. Water line for contaminated water supplies. Everybody's on wells there. Next. And some in situ treatment, another New York State site. Slide. Raritan-based slag.
Really close to Tony's site in Sayreville.
Yeah, well, Dan and I fished that area, and we never knew that we were standing on, kettle bottoms. So, and this is just these pictures look old because they are old, but this is rolling steel. Demolition of buildings, work closely with the remedial program. Florence, yeah. That looks real old, but it's not as old. And then, like I said, vapor, very complex vapor sites, another New York State site. We don't do much vapor work in New Jersey. Emil's septic, do a lot of work there. Slide. Maywood Chemical, ongoing right now. We actually just completed the residential cleanup of this was done by a responsible party. We did oversight, acting on their work plan. We do a lot of residential properties. And like I said, we do a lot of remedial support. Hopefully you'll be able to get a copy of this, and if you want to go through it on your own. I'm trying to get through this because I know other people have to speak. And then, people can call me, or actually the best thing to do would be go through Terry's group. If you have any interest in using the program, and we address every site differently, depends on, what the site's all about and what the threat might exist, there. This is my contact information. I have cards if anybody wants any before you leave. And that's pretty much it. So I apologize for going quickly, but just wanted to give you a general overview of what we do, what our capabilities are. But I didn't mention we have a lot of, we were talking about the regional assets. Now we have a lot of national assets. So we're doing flyovers for radiation. We have a plane that does all kinds of flyovers. This one in particular, we're doing radiation in the Niagara Falls area. And we're going to be starting that pretty soon. We have mobile laboratories. We have laboratories in Edison. If anything's in New Jersey, we can run the samples back to those labs. We have a regional lab and we have a national asset lab that's supposed to be mobile, but if it's close, it's more advantageous for us to run the sample. So that's about it. Thank you.
Joe, thank you so much. Everybody, please give Joe and Dan a round of applause for the great work they do. I just want to say that, like the commercial American Express, never leave home without them. It really is something in which you see, and I know we've been going through this real quickly, and I really apologize, folks, that I know we're going beyond time here, but really I just want to stress the importance of how under the Brownfield program, we work hand in hand with folks like Joe's group, the removal program, to help your communities. As Joe noted, this doesn't have to be necessarily one particular type of a program. They come in for anything, right? As long as you meet the criteria and eligibility, they will come, and they will stand the test of time and be there for the duration. So I want to thank you for that, Joe. And lastly, Frank, I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you, Joe, not only for today, but for your service and your assistance to our brownfield development area communities. And some of the projects would not have happened without you and your team and the mobile laboratory. Oh my gosh, that was. Thank you, Rachel. Sorry about that. Thank you again, Joe, Terry, and both the Brownfields and the Circle and Removal Action Team. Again, critically important as a catalyst to move brownfield projects forward. There's at least a dozen sites in Camden I can point to directly where that would not have happened if the drums, the asbestos, the lead, and other things were removed as the first step. I'm going to provide a very quick brownfield development update. Next slide, Rachel. So I'm not going to go through what a brownfield site is, but for our brownfield development area program, the Brownfields Act, as amended, they're the 4 requirements. So we have updated news that our brownfield development area designation, the applications are now due July 31st. So we pushed back the application period until July 31st for municipalities and redevelopment authorities to apply. Next slide. So again, July 31st for the Brownfield Development Area applications, the new applications. Not going to go. I've showed this slide before. This is the Somerville BDA that Ron Wachowski in our office works on. But $23 million, 15-year relationship, very similar to the relationship Tony had with Sayreville, and Perth Amboy was mentioned, where we're working with EPA. That's the type of relationship that's needed to handle these challenging sites in our brownfield development area communities, and we're looking forward to working with more municipalities and working with more redevelopment authorities on challenging sites, whether they're in Somerset County, Middlesex County, Mercer County, or anywhere else. Next slide, please. So in addition to new brownfield development area applications, we are also going to, during this time, allow for modifying existing brownfield development areas. We have brownfield development areas in 27 municipalities across the state. So going back to the definition of a brownfield development area, both for new applications and for communities that might be interested in revising their existing brownfield development area. By the way, a memorandum of understanding is executed between the Municipality Redevelopment Authority, DEP, and the steering committee. So we need at least 2 brownfield sites within a contiguous area. Boundaries of the BDA consistent with the boundaries of a distinct neighborhood. And obviously our municipalities and local redevelopment authorities are more experts than DEP, but tell the story about that the boundaries of the BDA are consistent with the boundaries of a neighborhood. Broad community support for establishing the BDA. The application process needs letters of support from the local municipality redevelopment authority and the steering committee members. And the 4th, establishing the BDA result in a benefit to public health, safety, and the environment. Again, that's for both new BDA applications and for modifying existing BDAs. Next slide. That's the Salem BDA, by the way. Really quickly, we just received a application to expand a brownfield development area in Camden, the Kramer Hill Brownfield Development Area. There are 2 brownfield development areas in Camden. That is the 100-year floodline elevation that's a little dated, showing the community. Camden is one of many communities at climate risk, and Terry was mentioning additional funding, federal funding, to look at our EJ communities and climate impact. So this is going to help many communities in New Jersey. Next slide. A little closer look at our 2 brownfield development areas, and the brownfields isolate the community from the beautiful Delaware River waterfront, both in the North Camden neighborhood and the Kramer Hill neighborhood. Next slide. That's a little close. That's okay. That was the Kramer Hill Brownfield Development Area. The benefits of the Brownfield, so there are some of the environmental challenges we had. They're the plus 2+ miles of brownfield sites in the Kramer Hill neighborhood, isolating the neighborhood to the south from accessing the beautiful Delaware River. So one of the priorities there was to reconnect the community to that waterfront. And next slide will show that we've actually succeeded in that. That's the site that Joe and the EPA mobile laboratory showed up following the $200,000 EPA Brownfields assessment grant. And without those two things, there wouldn't be a Kroc Community Center serving 8,000 area residents with medical care, food, enrichment services, and other things. Behind that, along the river and past the Kroc Center is the 62-acre Kramer Hill Waterfront Park. So that neighborhood went from no meaningful access to the Delaware River to over a mile of access. And there's kayak launches, there's sensory gardens, there's a 2-acre fishing pond, an amazing asset to the region, not just to the city of Camden. And you can see the North Camden neighborhood behind that, downtown Camden, and then in the far distance, not too far distance, the Center City, Philadelphia. Next slide. I'm not going to go into all the accessory leveraged money from other programs we got. I'm happy to talk about that, but we don't have enough time. So we just got a request from the Camden Redevelopment Agency to expand the Kramer Hill Brownfield Development Area. This is the East Camden neighborhood, which includes Kramer Hill and this area that our friends at EPA, like Joe Rotola, know very well, the Federal Street corridor. So we received that request on behalf of the Camden Redevelopment Agency by Brownfield Redevelopment Solutions. Michelle, Christina, do you want to say a few words about? Okay. Well, I just have a few bosses at DEP to go back 1 second, Rachel. I wanted to show where's the rail spur? This site and this site. The two sites in red here, about additional 6 sites that the request is to expand the BDA. One of those sites is the Borden Chemical site. And Joe, I don't remember how much money you spent on that site, but I do remember Dave Rosoff was the on-scene coordinator. So would you? Well, I mean, I don't want to tell you how much money came out of your budget, Joe, on that one, but
Slightly less than $2 million. That was when things were cheap. Concord, yeah. Still working on that, actually, illegally. A little less than $2 million, I believe.
about $2 million. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Michelle. And as Michelle mentioned, in that same Federal Street corridor neighborhood in East Camden, again, right next to our Kramer Hill Brownfield development area. So this is the Borden Chemical site that Joe just mentioned, and this is the site Michelle just mentioned. That's the Concord Chemical site, even a more challenging removal action. So again, without the drums being taken out and the asbestos taking out of those sites, Concord Chemical burn. That's another long story, but that was the catalyst to allow the Camden Redevelopment Agency to go to the Brownfields program to start Brownfields work, both with our federal partners and with the state. Next slide.
Yep. And I just want to remind, we have to be out of this room at 12:15 today because there's an event taking place at 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Rachel. Will you come to the front? You're up next.
Okay. So I wanted to give an update on the HCSRF nonprofit grant. So as part of the HCSRF, the Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Fund, there is specific allocations that is just for nonprofit entities, 501c3 nonprofit entities. And the statute defining the nonprofit grant can be found in the Brownfield Act, NJSA 5810B1, etc. The specific statute is 25.3, and the nonprofit grant was added to the statute in 2005 as part of a pilot program, and by pilot I mean temporary.
Rachel, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I know our speaker from Isles, Sean Jackson has a limited available time, and it's in his speaker spot. Would you mind seating your presentation? We'll come back to it after Sean gives his presentation.
That's fine. It's just very important for us to get out this message to the nonprofit community that is attending this roundtable right now. So we'll do it at the end, but I want to make sure that we can do it by 12:15.
Thank you, Rachel. Our next speaker, hopefully he's available virtually. Ed is available virtually. The magic of technology. So I see Sean Jackson, even though I like to see him in person. He's very small, not in person, but on our screen. And I really appreciate Sean, his time. He moved his schedule around to assist us. And we've worked with Sean on brownfields across the state, particularly in South Jersey. So he's a great user of our brownfields program. And he's going to talk about an amazing project on the Hamilton-Trenton border that thankfully we were able to help one of the big hurdles to get to this amazing development called the Mill One Social Profit Center. So Sean, would you tell everybody about that great project? Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all you do in Trenton and everywhere else through Isles.
And thank you for that kind introduction, Frank. I very much appreciate that. And Rachel, in the parlance of the U.S. Congress, thank you for yielding so I can share my presentation and get on my way to the meeting I need to get to, but I appreciate the chance to chat with you all. I had a presentation I had sent along, so I don't know, are you going to put that up for me, Rachel, and I'll advance it, or how does that work? Or do I just screen share?
We're advancing. We put you ahead of us, Sean, so we're advancing.
I think it's better if you're able to share. Does that work for you?
Yep, just give me 1 second to do that.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
gang, for the in the middle of our conversation here, having these technical conversations. There's share. All right, and let me get over to my screen to make sure I've got it. Well, while I'm doing that, let me just tell you a little bit about our organization and who we are and what we do. It is Isles. I often get the joke of Isles. It's not like in a movie theater or a concert hall. It's Isles, I-S-L-E-S, and the idea is creating islands of self-sufficiency and redevelopment and community growth. And as we do that in struggling communities, we will knit together a successful and impactful neighborhood that that has led us to a focus that looks at essentially, two kind of core functions, if you will. Here we go. I think that. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So let me go. So it is Isles, as I said, I-S-L-E-S, and our mission is focusing on fostering self-reliant families and healthy and sustainable communities. We've been around for 40 years and doing this work in the Trenton area, focused in Trenton, but not limited to it. And one of the things in those 40 years that we really experienced organizationally was the challenge that nonprofits have on finding quality, affordable, and long-term sustainable office space. We kind of migrated around the city of Trenton as we grew and as buildings were sold from underneath us or were in such disrepair that they were not really something that we could continue to occupy. And so discussion we started to have was creating a place for us to have administrative offices and pull our team together. And as we did that, we kind of harken back to a general principle of the organization, which is how can we leverage what we're doing and help impact others along the way. And so what that led us to was maybe we can do something bigger than just a office for ourselves. And we endeavored to create what we call the Social Profit Center. And we found this complex, and I'm showing you an aerial here, give you a landmark that people will recognize. If you see the little plus sign, that's the Northeast Corridor Rail Line, Amtrak, Jersey Transit, just halfway between the Trenton's train station and the Hamilton train station. This is Nottingham Way over here, and this is North Johnston Ave, which is our front door. And this is the entire complex along here. And you can see this waterway where my cursor is going. This is the channelized pond run, which is part of what has brought me into the world of DEP on this project. The complex, you can see, just to help you orient a little bit better, again, here is again the main line. You see Nottingham Way here. This is the main complex we call Mill 1, and it's got 5 different components to it. It is all one contiguous building, but we refer to them as building A through D. And then there is also this large warehouse at the rear of the property that is technically 57 North Johnston Avenue, so that's why we see 57 on it. And Isles came to this building after its kind of long and august history. It was completed in 1897 by one of the early developers. Henry Rothschild saw that the rail line had been completed by the Pennsylvania Railroad a few years earlier and said, halfway to New York, halfway to Philadelphia, looks like a great place to build a factory. And that's what he did. And they started with the making of shirts and other clothing, and they actually had a rail spur that came right into the building off of that new Pennsylvania Railroad. In the late 20s, it went to Arrowhead shirts, as they were known at the time, and then it migrated to a company called Atlantic Products just in the midst of the Depression, which was making luggage. And they were well situated when 10 years later we got into World War II, and the largest point of embarkation on the eastern seaboard was from Fort Dix. That was a huge gathering point for soldiers who were heading to the European theater, and they were coming here to get basic training and get equipped. This building, and I'm talking to you from the building actually, this building became bustling with a massive influx of orders for duffel bags and garment bags and kits for officers and the like. That carried obviously through the war, and post-war it became a place where they got expanded from luggage into sporting good products, golf bags, bowling ball bags, all things along those lines. And that lasted into the late 60s when challenges with trade started to impact things. And by the 1980s, this building had really basically become abandoned. And it was not until 2005 that we got engaged. This gives you kind of a view from State Street. East State Street is in the foreground. In the background here, you can see the rail line that runs behind the building. And in the mid-50s, it was bustling. But by the mid-80s, it had become a pretty desolate place and starting to fall into disrepair. So again, you see here's the main complex, and then here is this large warehouse. So Isles came along and made a partnership with a company called Modern Recycled Spaces. You may have bumped into them. They have a similar complex, just not even 3 blocks from here, further down on East State Street, where they took a 1-story old mill building and have turned it into commercial and retail space. This was a more audacious project. This is 250,000 square feet. And Isles had, in the process, been the lucky recipient of that warehouse building in the back. And probably a refrain that you in the industry, living with Brownfield projects, have heard many times. I have said many times in the long and twisted remedial investigation that went on. There is good reason to look a gift horse in the mouth, notwithstanding the old line. This was a gift horse that came to us as someone who wanted to donate the building. We got some good mileage out of the building as an income-generating property that we worked with TerraCycle, who many of you probably know. This was a place where they gathered a lot of their product and repackaged it. And it was a good symbiotic relation, but we had an underlying environmental problem that we inherited. And that led us to needing to do a pretty comprehensive site investigation. There were issues with groundwater, which ultimately we determined was coming from off-site. A couple modest chemical spills, and then New Jersey's favorite contamination, historic fill. We were struggling with how to figure our way through all of this, and that's where Frank alluded to my experience working with the department through the HDSRF program to help turn around challenged sites and deal with the environmental issues. And so I got in contact with the department, and I worked on a major project in South Jersey that HDSRF was pivotal into making it work, and it was pivotal here for us. So with the $300,000 grant from the DEP through EDA, we worked with our company Ramble Environmental, boiled it down to the 7 AOCs that needed to be investigated, settled on the 3 that needed the work, and we have done the first phase of that and are right now working on the remaining phases to be completed hopefully this summer. So it's a combination of some excavation, institutional controls, and then engineering controls. Without HDSRF's engagement here, we would still be dealing with these long-term problems. And I don't know that the transformation of this building, as you see in the pictures I'm going to share with you, of what we inherited in 2005 and what we were able to open in 2021 as the Mill 1 complex, would have been able to happen. This is what we call Building A. This was the front door. And it gives you a sense of how the front of the building, you can see the windows that have been, filled in, boarded up, and just the kind of hodgepodge of different things that were done when they needed to vent a particular machine. You can see these pictures where they just cut out windows and put these fans up in the windows. Today, with some spit and shine, as we say, you now have a much more attractive, restored, and vibrant building. And this is now the front of that same area where you're looking at. These doors were done to historic standards, windows to historic standards, and these old industrial windows were removed and taken to a firm down in Delaware and restored and then reinstalled. As our founder, Marty Johnson, liked to say, this is kind of the ultimate recycling project. All of this could have been demolished and ground into something and ended up in a landfill, but instead 250,000 square feet has kind of gone from the tired and the worn out. You can see even the clock faces had fallen out of the tower. It was the building that had seen obviously better times. But today, we've got the clock tower back, the faces are back in, the windows have been restored, and it's now a busy and viable building. Here's another example of the new windows that have gone in and clean up the building. This is what the masonry was looking like at the time and the impact on the windows. Now here we are restored, and you can see how the masonry work all has been redone. We had to rebuild these parapets and get them in shape. This was the front entrance of the building. I'll show you a picture in a little bit of how that looks now. This was the old smokestack. We restored this and repaired this gaping hole. It was quite a struggle, but here's what the complex looks like now from the drone photo. This is a little dated. I need to get a new drone out there to show where the plantings are along here now. We were able to do great things on the inside as well. So spaces that were all painted and with lead paint, which we dealt with and removed. You can see the old windows that have been painted out. We're able to get cleaned up and made available for office space now. We were able to go up on the roof and do some of the sustainable things that I know so many at 401 East State Street have been working on for so many years on stormwater controls and the like. This is our rain roof. It's been a huge help and getting a lot of activity these last couple of weeks, as everybody knows. and the inside. What was vacant space with the ceiling that was collapsing is now where we host events for our nonprofit tenants here in the building. And we have a dozen different nonprofit agencies, from Sierra Club and League of Conservation Voters to the Coalition to End Domestic Violence, to Arm in Arm, which does emergency food delivery, to the Trenton Digital Initiative, which connects folks with who don't have computers with hardware and internet connection so they can be connected. It's a great, vibrant building. And we've even gotten to the point where we now have our, with the help of DEP again, a shout out to Peg Hanna. We have, with support through PSE&G, a couple car chargers in the back, where we run our electric vehicle fleet that does a downtown shuttle service you may have seen around the city. Great open spaces for tenants to use, and shared conference spaces. Again, back to that idea of how do we make buildings affordable for tenants. We share the conference rooms, so people don't have to have a conference room in every space. It enables them to have a smaller footprint, pay less rent, and use the facilities when they need them. These are the insides of our offices, trying to minimize the need for actual offices with doors and hard walls, lots of glass and open space to get the direct sunlight in as much as we can. Down at the 57 building, we started and did some of the excavation work has been now completed, digging out the contaminated soils. This was where we had some, this was a garage facility, for many years by the previous company that was here. We had to dig out and replace all that soil and get that filled back in. And then, as you all understand with HDSRF, important part is not only are you going to help us do the environmental investigation, but our part of the bargain is to make sure that the building gets restored. And this was, again, how we did that work here at Building 57. All these old decrepit windows were replaced with new, again, historically accurate, and capturing as best we can the beauty of a warehouse. New garage door, again, more new windows, and a very ambitious graffiti painter. This was always a great story. This is what the roof looked like by the end of our time. Struggling nonprofit, trying to squeeze as much income for our service purposes as we could out of the building. We were not in great shape to be able to keep this roof intact. This isn't what the roof looked like every day. This is after we'd taken all the tar paper and all the tar off, but that's how many holes were in it. They did we've now gotten the roof replaced. This is all the new material going up, and the new roof on the inside, all squared away, and the building getting ready for new tenants. On the rooftop, we installed solar here on the top of the one end of the building, and you saw that we got the clocks in place, and we also got solar in place on the rest of the complex, including the warehouse building. So this is a massive community solar project through the support of BPU that Isles partnered with our partner who has the other end of the building to put in place. And it's bringing the benefits of solar energy not just to the building, but to the community around, which is really something that's near and dear to our heart, because most of our residents outside this building are living in row houses where it's very difficult to be able to put an effective solar array. And so a lot of families here don't have any way to take advantage of the solar opportunity and to recapture what they're paying in social benefit charges through to on their PSE&G bill or other bills, don't really get a chance to take the benefit. And so community solar offers them that chance. So that gives you quickly, I know we want to leave time for Rachel to talk about the important policy side of all this work that HDSRF has helped to make possible. I couldn't be a bigger advocate for the component that allows nonprofits to participate. The law as it exists is only allows us to participate as it relates to the investigation. I can assure you, I am having to spend quite a few shekels on the remediation side. And so I don't know if we haven't shared and coordinated, Frank, whether that's on script with where everyone wants to see HDSRF policy go. But I will just tell you, this complex of 250,000, actually 350,000 when you add in the warehouse, was made possible and successful because of the ability of this nonprofit to access, the HDSRF funds. And I would love to see other ways that we could access HDSRF dollars to try to do infill housing projects around the city of Trenton, where there are these small footprints of projects that often can't get done because there are owners that we can't track down. And they're small footprints that don't make a lot of sense for a major developer to come in, but the remediation costs scare off individuals from taking it on. We'd love to partner with the department to figure out how can we get those sites cleaned up and then redeveloped, which is, I know, the heart of what the program is all about, and that you've all done with great success. We'd love to see it continue to grow. So I'll open up for questions, recognizing that Rachel needs to get up on deck.
I think we're going to hold questions, Sean, till after Rachel's next presentation. But thank you so much for the presentation and all that Isles done in Trenton and the area. And the nonprofit pilot grant that we've had with the HDSRF program since 2005 has now run out of money. So we will. We're going to convene some sort of working group, at least have a further conversation about. We need a legislative fix for this anyway, and we might as well have a broader conversation than what the pilot grant offered. The infill housing you talk about, Sean, pocket parks, other things that Isles has been involved in for 40 years in Trenton. I think there's a ear to hear what the nonprofit community can do to help brownfield redevelopment in our communities like Trenton. Thank you.
Absolutely. If you're looking for folks to testify and encourage our legislators to think creatively again as it comes to HDSRF, happy to be counted as a member of that chorus in front of the legislature, because this has been a huge help to us. I got to sign off.
Thank you, Sean, for that offer.
Share, people can get them to me. Thanks so much for the opportunity. And
thank
Rachel,
you so much, Sean. And Rachel, you're up. I know we've gone a little over time here, so my apologies to the audience here and the audience at home.
Sure. So last thing I said was that the nonprofit grant was added to the Brownfield Act in 2005 as a pilot program. So by pilot, I mean temporary and not permanent. All right, and here is the statute, and I underlined the important aspects of it. And related to this presentation, the last sentence is the most important, that the total amount awarded pursuant to this pilot program shall not exceed $5 million. All right, and before I go into some data, I just want to give some information about the nonprofit grant itself. So again, it's a pilot program. It is only for tax-exempt 501c3 organizations, and that we would need that designation shown to us through the IRS. And back in 2005, there was a one-time allocation of $5 million placed into the HDSRF. And they were meant to fund preliminary assessments, site investigations, and remedial investigations. This is very similar to the public entity assessment investigation grant, if you are familiar with that grant. And so two things the nonprofit needs to do in order to be eligible for the grant is they must demonstrate an ownership interest and demonstrate a commitment to redevelopment, just like our public entities. All right, and so here's the very important message that we wanted to get out at this roundtable. So this is an overview of the nonprofit grant since its inception. And what I wanted to do is show the current state of the $5 million allocation. And so on the very bottom, you can see that's the number of applications. So you can see in the first 15 years of the program, the first 3 bars, we did, about, $1 million or a little bit less than that over 15 years. But then you can see, starting in 2020, we had, I guess, unexpectedly high asks for the nonprofit grant, and and then also I wanted to talk about what we have pending at this time. And so at this time, there's 3 applications pending approval at EDA. And there are 4 that are pending in our pipeline here, and we have reviewed all of those applications, and we know how many we can approve. And at the end, I would say in the next, come summer, we will be oversubscribed, and we are not able to fund 1.5 HDSRF applications for the nonprofit grant. And I know that amount looks really high, but it's just because one of those applications is over $1 million. Okay, and we cannot fund those applications or any more nonprofit applications unless there is a legislative change to the Brownfield Act.
We're a little pressed for time. These are some of our nonprofit partners that we've worked with across the state with this pilot program that Rachel just talked about that is unfortunately now become exhausted. So you heard Sean Jackson and the great Mill One Social Profit Center that Isles did. We've worked with open space nonprofits, environmental nonprofits, Monmouth Conservation Foundation, Open Space Land Institute, another Tony Finley project, the Essex Hudson Greenway, Swimming River Park in Red Bank. We work with the Monmouth Conservation Foundation in Monmouth County. We've worked with Habitat for Humanity in several projects in Newark, Patterson, and Monmouth County. A housing concern in Neptune, City Works. 3 grants to them, Camden Lutheran Housing, 2 grants to them, Tri-County Action Partnership in Bridgeton, the New Jersey PAC Center in Newark, a nonprofit arm. We helped in that project, so you can thank us when you're seeing great art and culture in Newark, and a charter school in Teaneck. So really wide variety of projects we've done, and the projects that Rachel's talking about that we're not able to fund are projects like a hospital in Salem proposed, and some work in the healthcare industry in the Camden area. So from houses to open space, to schools, to cultural venues, the nonprofit grant has been very helpful, as you heard Sean talk about. So next slide. This is the Swimming River Park in Red Bank. Next slide. This is the Mill One Social Profit Center that Sean talked about on the Trenton-Hamilton border. Rachel, do you want to take this slide, or do you want me to take it?
I think you wrote this one up, Frank.
No. Oh boy. So as Rachel mentioned, the pilot that was set up in 2005 has been exhausted, and we cannot process any more grants with our friends at Economic Development Authority. So we have a few that we're able to process. There's a few waiting for on EDA's docket, but we now have several in that we're not going to be able to fund. So as you heard from Sean, and the few quick examples I've shown you, they've been the nonprofit community, as well as our municipal partners and our redevelopment authorities, have all been important partners in taking brownfield sites and creating local community assets. So we want to look to see how we can create a permanent program to fund nonprofits and what it might look like. And the answers outside the department are what we want to hear, and how we can best serve the nonprofit community in our mutual interest to redevelop brownfield sites. So what we're going to do is we are going to, for folks interested in the room, for folks interested at home, and thank you to Sean for I guess being our first participant in a future meeting, virtual meeting in 2 to 3 weeks to invite interested parties to have a conversation with our office. Alan? We have to get out by 12:15.
And Alan, real quick before you say, and I think
So is it fair to say that before we meet, that people in this room and listening would contact their legislators and talk to them about this issue?
yes, because what will cause a change in the statute, what could cause a re-upping of the 5 million or another amount would be a legislative change that a legislator would sponsor a bill based on comments from the community, and that bill would get approved in the Senate and then ultimately by the governor. But we would need a legislator to sponsor a bill. And so what I think would be important to discuss are what we would like to see as part of changes to the Brownfield Act, and everyone should be involved in that.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Rachel. And we look forward to getting folks who are interested. Please email Rachel, and we will set up a meeting in 2 to 3 weeks to initiate this discussion. But again, this is, both. I think our friends at EDA also think this is the nonprofit community is important to serve with Brownfield incentives. So we're looking to get some ideas and see how we can work together with our legislature, because that's where the fix is needed, to better serve the nonprofit community and our municipal and redevelopment authorities that we work with as well.
Yep, yeah, and I think at the very least, the most important thing is that we make the nonprofit grant a permanent program as opposed to a pilot. At the very least, if we're able to make that change, that's a wonderful thing.
Jamila, I think we have 3 minutes for questions. And again, I apologize that the talks went a little long, but we got really some great information from EPA, EDA, and our other partners. Any questions from our virtual audience or our in-person audience?
Yeah, there were some questions, so let me just go back up. And this is for Joe from EPA. Joe Hochreiter says hello. Okay.
Well, let me give since the Joes obviously want to speak, so let me give this to Joe Rottola.
Long time ago. Hi, Joe.
Sure. And we had a question from Rick Scheuer. If you were taking any questions. So PCBs identified in soils below TSCA level, unknown source. How have you been handling these materials?
Please have Rick email me, and we'll look into it. We have some in-house PCB experts, and have Rick email myself, and I'll get Kevin involved. Yeah, with the specifics of the project, right?
Right. Okay, Rick. We'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
And then we did have a question about, and this was answered in the chat from John Hogue, who manages the Palmyra BDA. Can BDAs be modified outside of the deadline for new applications? And just so everyone knows, BDA modifications can take place at any time, and it's not related to the deadline for BDA application.
Right. So you answered that, Rachel. Yes, the deadline of July 31st is for new brownfield development area applications. Modifications can come at any time once you're a BDA community.
I don't think he's here anymore. Okay, and I think that's it.
Oh my gosh, 12:14. Thank you guys so much, our virtual audience and our in-person audience. Thanks to EPA, EDA, Sean Jackson, and Isles for your presentations. And we'll see you next quarter in July.